What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. Sunday was a pretty perfect encapsulation of 2020 and just how things are going. Manchester United give up 6, Liverpool give up 7, and Napoli can't travel to their game against Juventus for fear of legal prosecution for breaking mandated safety protocols because of the players that tested positive on their team. So Juventus just kind of shows up, and now we got to figure out what to do with the very strange situation in Italy. That pretty much sums up how 2020 is going. This is the strangest thing, and soccer is not immune to it in any way, shape, or form. Of course, there are bigger things going on, but we're here to talk soccer. So we're going to talk about all of it. As always, we're going to start with the first 5 here, and we're going to begin with what happened to Liverpool. I mean, nobody could have seen this coming. And I don't think anybody thought Aston Villa was capable of scoring 7 goals, and that's not even necessarily a criticism of Aston Villa. This was so bad that nobody's even talking about the impact not having Alisson and Sadio Mane in this game had. Because it just didn't matter. They were so poor. And of course, Adrian directly contributes to the first goal. But in that first half, Liverpool had opportunities. Salah gets one back. It's not like they were destroyed from the get-go. They were in the game. You kind of felt like if they could just turn it around the second half, they'd be fine. But then you get to the end of the first half, and they just keep giving up goals. So all of a sudden, you go into halftime, and Ollie Watkins has a hat trick. So hopefully at this point, we can stop wondering whether Ollie Watkins can play at this level. I don't understand why there was such a question mark with him, why there was so much doubt that he could do this, and there was so much sort of balking at the price tag Aston Villa paid for him. Of course, it's no guarantee, but they desperately needed a striker. Other teams were sniffing around at him. It's not like they were the only Premier League team that thought he could do it. And he was the best striker in the Championship last year. He's really good. And it doesn't take a lot of watching him to figure out that he's really gifted and deserves this kind of opportunity. So good for him. I'm glad we can hopefully put that discussion to rest. But so they add 2 more at the end of the first half. Ross Barkley's having a field day. And then it just gets even worse in the second half. I mean, it's not fair to say we should have seen this coming, because there is no world in which this is a thing that should have happened. But I've brought it up before, and it's not exactly a secret that Liverpool have looked shaky at the back since the restart, pretty much. You're seeing some uncharacteristic mistakes. You saw them in the opener against Leeds. Andy Robertson had one against Arsenal. And now all of a sudden, Roy Keane saying they looked a little sloppy, and Jurgen Klopp going in at him for it looks a little bit silly from Klopp's perspective. But there was no indication from that Arsenal game this was what was coming next. Because I thought that Arsenal performance was as solid as they've been in a long time. They just haven't looked like themselves. And this team is built... Yes, that front 3 is phenomenal, but this team is built from the back more than anything else. With Alexander-Arnold and with Robertson, and specifically with Van Dijk. If you don't have good center back play, and your fullbacks are not exactly defensive savants, they're phenomenal players who do their job defensively, but they're built to attack, you're going to be in big trouble. And so you get a some really poor game from your center backs. We're going to talk about this when we get to United in segment 2. You got to have center backs that do their job. It was just cataclysmic all the way around. And one of the more concerning parts of this is just the amount of space that Aston Villa had to run into. Barkley could have had another goal or two. They just didn't put any pressure on the ball whatsoever. And one of the indicators of that is the amount of deflected goals that Aston Villa scored, which seems contradictory on the surface. But my point is that if you're closing the ball down effectively, those deflections are not going to take the same kind of path. They're not going to look the same because the ball doesn't have an opportunity to angle itself toward the net first and then do something weird. You're going to pop it up into the air. It's going to go whatever direction because you're blocking the shot as it's being kicked. Whereas when you're not closing anything down, you're standing 3 yards away, all of a sudden you've got the pace of the ball and the ball is going toward the net. So even if you deflect it, it's more likely that it's going to go into the net and cause more problems for your goalkeeper. You have to block the shot instead of just kind of getting in its way and hoping that it doesn't end up in your net. They did not close space down well at all. That was the biggest takeaway I had. And part of the concern here for Liverpool is that these defensive problems are coming in a variety of forms. It's not just one thing. It's individual errors. It's an awful collective defensive performance here. They were getting beat over the top when they played a higher line some. It's not just one thing. It was just stunning to watch. I have no explanation for it. I don't think Klopp has an explanation for it. And they're lucky it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day, I don't think, just because of where Manchester City is at right now. We're going to get to them next. But you take your beating, you get an international break, which is a huge break that Liverpool caught here, that they get to go into an international break and try and fix some things before they got to go play, of all teams, Everton, in a game that if you lose that one, you might be in a little bit of trouble. So you get to just hit the reset button here, which is exactly what Liverpool need. They're not exactly worried about Manchester City at this moment in time. The only other problem they might have here is City are going to thump some people, assuming they turn this thing around and start looking like the team we expect them to be. So you could very well lose. You're probably going to lose. Liverpool is probably going to lose the goal differential battle anyway, just because of the way they play and the way Manchester City plays. But when you get outscored by 5 against Aston Villa, you're pretty much ensuring you're not going to win that goal differential, which means you got to win it. You got to win the league outright on points. But that's a minor concern at this moment in time. They got to fix their defensive problems first and foremost. It was shocking, and good for Dean Smith and good for Aston Villa. There is a benefit to sticking with your manager, to finding people that genuinely care about your club, and just letting them try and figure some things out. It was bad last year. They were bad at the back. They couldn't score goals. Jack Grealish was kind of out there doing what he could, but he's not exactly an elite goal scorer. He's an elite creator, which is, again, why I was so excited that Ollie Watkins ended up there. He's the kind of guy that can take advantage and put the opportunities Jack Grealish creates in the back of the net. So all of a sudden, they're right there near the top of the table. I don't think it's going to last, but this is the kind of start you need to make sure you're not part of the relegation discussion. And now you see what they can do. I'm still not convinced this is a team that's going to be in the European conversation by the end of the season, but there aren't exactly that many teams in the mid-table that are looking awfully impressive at the moment. It's not out of the question they could finish 10th, 11th. And if some other teams don't figure some things out. Hey, maybe they get into 8th or ninth or something. I don't see that happening, but good for them. It was tough last year, but they never quit, and that was one of the things I kept harping on. As bad as it got sometimes, as likely as it looked like they were going to get relegated at times, you could tell that they never quit on Dean Smith. They were unified and they were bought into what they were trying to do. It just wasn't working. Now you bring some additional pieces in. You find a way to stay up. You get that extra reinforcement. And all of a sudden it's going really well for them. So I'm not freaking out about Liverpool. It is definitely a cause for concern now. Absolutely. They have defensive problems that need to get fixed, or else they're going to have a hard time winning this league. The question is just, is anybody going to actually make them pay for it? Because Everton is sitting there right now, and I'm almost at the point where they're in the title discussion just because everybody else has been so bad and they've been so good. I know they haven't played the stiffest competition at times, but, I mean, that game is going to be massive. So, you catch a really, really nice break to go get some rest, to go play on international duty and just get away from everything if you're Liverpool. Come back and try and fix these problems, because that was just stunning. Number 2, as I said, we're going to Manchester City next. Drop points again, this time against Leeds United. They do come away with a draw. The growing concern for Manchester City, for me, is of course you still got the defensive problems. But that final third, their performance just was not good enough. They didn't take their chances. Sterling gets a nice goal to go up 1-0, but they easily could have put 2 or 3 away in the first 15-20 minutes of the game. They didn't put it out of reach. Leeds looked lost. And then, kind of it similar to what happened against Liverpool, they play themselves into the game. They find a way to survive. And it was a fairly balanced game after that. They had all their opportunities, but they finally get their goal through Rodrigo after Ederson has a terrible punch that he just basically bounces off the back of, I think it was Benjamin Mendy. And it's just sitting there. Rodrigo pounces. City ended the game pretty well, but could not find a way to get a winning goal. So it's just not, it's not working for him right now. Bright side is that the pairing of Aymeric Laporte and Ruben Diaz at center back looked much more solid. I think they've found an answer there. How much of an answer it is still to be determined. But at least for the near future, that's the pairing I'm going with if I'm Pep Guardiola. Fullbacks are a problem right now, specifically Benjamin Mendy. But they keep throwing money at it, and it's not working. Maybe you go to Zinchenko, but that's my almost bigger concern at this moment. And then also the final third. I understand they don't have a striker. Of course that doesn't help, but Sterling is capable of being that guy, and he did get him a goal. It was a nice finish. They just have enough pieces that they should be able to win a game like this. But there's something that's not working for them pretty much every game at this point. Whether it's the defense, whether it's being poor in the final third like they were in this game, they're not exactly looking threatening at the moment. And then, from the Leeds perspective, this team is so fun to watch. Marcel Bielsa does such a great job. And again, we're going to get to what happened with Manchester United in a little while, but look at how much of an impact he's having on these players. Patrick Bamford is all of a sudden scoring consistently in the Premier League. And all of these guys that were just sort of sitting in the Championship are playing at a Premier League level. they've had a great start to the season. They're beating the teams that they're supposed to. Now, they had a little bit of trouble with Fulham there at the end, but they found a way to survive. But they played Liverpool incredibly tough. Now they play Manchester City incredibly tough. They look like they belong with anybody in this league. They're entertaining. They're fun to watch. They're a great story. And they're the real deal. They put themselves in a position where now you're wondering how far up the table they can get, rather than whether they're going to be part of the relegation battle, which is step one if you're a team coming up, even if you're a team that expects to be in the Premier League like Leeds. To get some points on the board early, especially with the difficulty of their schedule. To find a way to get through a Liverpool game and a Manchester City game in a very comfortable spot is huge. It just changes the complexion of the season and takes that pressure off of you. The pressure that is now squarely on Fulham and West Brom to try and fix this thing before they are so far back that you can't dig yourself out of the bottom three. So good for Bielsa, good for Leeds. They're going to be good, and quite frankly, they're just taking advantage of all of these teams that are not playing well right now. It's them, it's Everton, and it's Aston Villa, and to a certain extent Leicester, who are really capitalizing, and Crystal Palace a little bit. But everybody else has been shaky, and so those are the teams that are finding ways to pick up points, winning the games they should for the most part, and they're all off to good starts because of it. Number 3, I alluded to this before. Napoli Juventus did not happen. Napoli never traveled to the stadium because they weren't allowed to leave. They had a couple positive tests. So health officials said you're not allowed to leave the city. Therefore, they could not travel to their game. So Juventus went through the process of putting out a starting lineup, all of that stuff to make it quote-unquote official. We're still waiting to figure out what this is actually going to end up being, because technically right now, by definition, it's a forfeit. But you would really hope Serie A has the reasonability to just reschedule this game and let them play. You can't sit there and make a team forfeit because they chose to follow the law instead of risking legal consequences. That's what we're talking about here. This wasn't just Napoli deciding they weren't going to go because a couple players tested positive. This was they were not allowed to leave. So very important difference there. And this is also just the world we're living in 2020. Things like this are going to happen. You got to find a way to work around it. You got to be flexible, willing to adjust. Because otherwise, this is just not going to be a season anybody can look back on with a sense of sort of integrity and feeling like everybody did the best they could to get a deserving champion at the end of the day. This is a huge game. Napoli have been pretty good. This could also significantly impact Juventus. If Juventus drop points again here, they could be in some trouble. So to punish Napoli would be really harsh and extremely unfair. Again, we'll see how this thing all plays out. But strange circumstances in Italy. Juve was just there at the stadium hanging out, waiting for Napoli to come, knowing that Napoli was not going to come. It was just surreal. But nevertheless, here we are. Hopefully we can just reschedule this game. Nobody has to forfeit points because we can't go down that road. If we're going to, we got to work with each other and just make this situation the best that it can be considering the circumstances. Over in Germany, both Bayern and Borussia Dortmund were able to bounce back from their shocking defeats last weekend. Bayern nearly dropped points again. They got 4 goals from Robert Lewandowski, needed all of them to beat Hertha Berlin. He scores in the 85th minute, they concede in the 88th, and he gets a penalty in the 93rd that ultimately gives all 3 points to Bayern. I would be really concerned about Bayern and talking in the context of the Champions League and the best team in Europe if all of the other best teams in Europe haven't even been even worse than they have so far. They have defensive problems too. They are making mistakes. This is about as bad of a defensive start as they've had in what seems like forever. They are shaky as well. But they didn't give up 7 the way Liverpool did. They haven't dropped the points that Manchester City has. I mean, you're running out of teams to look at. Real Madrid hasn't been great. It's PSG, and PSG had a couple losses to start their season. They're the only team that's consistently winning at this point, and that's because they're playing a softer schedule in France, and they haven't exactly these last couple weeks they haven't exactly been playing the best teams in the country. It's the only team that's consistently impressing right now. And they had an awful start to the season. Now, part of that was because they didn't have their full team and COVID and all of that, but it's just stunning how poor these teams have been so far. Dortmund was much more convincing in their win, 4-0 over Freiburg. Haaland gets 2 goals and an assist. Jadon Sancho is unavailable because of illness. It doesn't particularly matter for this team in these kind of games. They've got the depth to withstand that. They're fine. This is what you expected. I fully expected Bayern to have this kind of result too, which is the other concerning part of this for me, is that after what happened against Hoffenheim, the fact that they couldn't come out and control a game and put a game away, that they had leads in that they should have been able to waltz to 3 points, that really worries me. I'm just more worried about other teams, specifically those in England right now, than I am Bayern. They get the 3 points at the end of the day, and because Dortmund couldn't take advantage of their slip-up last week, they're right there in the thick of the title race. They're not at a massive disadvantage, which is why Dortmund was one of my losers last week, is they couldn't capitalize on that opportunity, and so now they're paying the price for it. That Bayern found a way to get 3 points because they're Bayern, and so they're right there in the same spot. Finally, our fifth thing here. First rather high-profile game in Spain ends in a draw between Barcelona and Sevilla. Luke de Jong scores off of a passage to play from a short corner in the 8th minute. Felipe Coutinho scores off a ball that Messi played into the box that ultimately fell at his feet in the 10th to equalize. That was what happened in the game. He got 2 early goals. Barcelona had some chances late to get a winner. Sevilla had a couple chances in there throughout the game as well. It was not a prototypically dominant Barcelona performance. Don't have too much to say here. Sevilla is good, continuing to prove it. The way that they competed with Bayern, the way they competed in this game. I'm curious to see what they can do in the Champions League, because that just has not been their foray. And we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end of the show today. But it's a point for Barcelona, which is obviously not what Barcelona is going for. But you get through it without dropping all 3 points. Still trying to figure things out. And again, this is a season without high expectations. So not the end of the world, but your first test, they pass. Not exactly with flying colors, but they showed up and got their goal back after conceding one. So there's your update from Spain. We're going to take a break. When we come back, winners and losers from this weekend. We will be talking Manchester United, and the only way to fix what is happening right now, not that it will actually fix it, but the only hope they have of turning things around. That's coming up next. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. And welcome back to Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. As I mentioned before, we're going to do winners and losers here. Also want to just throw out that Everton is a winner this week just by winning again and having what happened to Liverpool and what happened to Manchester United and Manchester City drop more points. They're putting pressure on people. I didn't include them in my list of 3 winners and losers here, but wanted to recognize that they are there by themselves at the top of the Premier League table right now and are looking great. Goal is to dive deeper into them in our supporters corner on Thursday, so stay tuned for more Everton content, but didn't want to completely ignore what they've done and what they did again this weekend. First winner is West Ham. To enter this season with so much turmoil and so much frustration and ill will in terms of the way that the fan base is feeling and what happened with Grady Diangana, to not perform particularly well in your first couple games. It was better against Arsenal, but they were flat against Newcastle. And then all of a sudden, they get 4-0 win against Wolves and a 3-0 win against Leicester in these last 2 weeks. They were so good against Leicester that David Moyes didn't make a substitution to the 88th minute. He didn't want to change because all 11 guys were playing phenomenal. It was incredible to watch. They absolutely controlled that game. Easily could have had another goal in there somewhere. This is another team that, because of some of these slip-ups, if they can keep this going, they could also factor themselves into the top half of the table, maybe even the European conversation. And what David Moyes has finally found, I think, is a set of 11 guys who are going to do the dirty work, who are going to put the extra effort in, all of the little things that they have not gotten from their big signings, whether it's Felipe Anderson or Andrei Yarmolenko, whoever it might be. It's Jared Bowen going and tracking runs, running 50 yards to go provide cover on defense. It's what Thomas Souček is doing in midfield. Mikel Antonio holding the ball up, making those runs to stretch the defense. He's been really good. They're scoring goals, but they've also been incredibly solid defensively. And that's where it starts, because that was one of their problems last year, and consistently has been. They just can't put together good defensive performances and put a set of good performances together. You could argue it's 3 in a row now. Yeah, they ended up giving up the late goal to Arsenal and didn't come away with anything. But it was better. And then they thrashed Wolves, and then they destroyed Leicester. You can't ignore what they're doing right now. This is as confident I've been as I've been in a West Ham team in a long time. And I have fallen consistently for what they look like on paper and assume they're going to finish 7th, 8th, 9th in the Premier League. They've still got a lot of work to do just because of how deep the league this is this year. I keep harping on that, but I think it's that important. But in terms of fulfilling their potential and actually becoming the team they're supposed to be, this is as confident as I've been. Again, it's 2 games. I'm not going to jump on board completely yet. And I still don't even know what it means if they are as good as they're supposed to be, because that could mean they're the 10th best team in the league. But you got to give David Moyes credit, and they finally found a combination that I think works. And the formula they have is sustainable. If they can keep playing this well and keep being this solid defensively, they're going to pick up a lot of points. They're going to win a lot of games. And with all of these flawed teams, if some serious changes and improvements aren't made, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, just because they're showing up and playing consistently when a lot of teams around them are not. One of those teams that is not showing up is Manchester United. I don't exactly know where to begin because it was all so bad against Tottenham. So they get the early penalty. Bruno Fernandes puts it away. They're up 1-0 within 2 minutes. By the middle of the first half, they're down 2-1. The defense was just laughably bad. And it was across the board. It was Maguire, it was Bailly, it was Luke Shaw, it was Aaron Wan-Bissaka. It was just hard to comprehend what was happening on that back line. So then you have the incident with Eric Lamela and Martial. Lamela is lucky to not pick up a yellow there, in my opinion. He was clearly instigating and at least trying to annoy Martial a little bit. But the bottom line is that there are very few things that are kind of black and white and clear when it comes to rulings in soccer. One of them is that if you slap somebody in the face, you're getting a red card for violent conduct. Bottom line, you can't go slap somebody. Martial just let his emotions get the best of him. Lamela didn't hit his face at all. He kind of pushed his elbow into his chest. No excuse. Don't really want to hear about Lamela being the one that instigated it. Yeah, he probably deserved a yellow, but Martial deserved a red. You just can't do that. And then Eric Bailly is lucky to not get sent off for his little incident with Harry Kane. You can make your own determination whether you think it was intentional or not. I don't want to say that it was. All I'm saying is he's lucky he didn't get sent off, because that looked pretty bad too. So that's in addition to how awful they were defensively. Spurs just keep pouring on goals. But this is where I've come down on this. And the reason I was sold on United coming into the season and sold on what they did at the end of last year, and I talked about this a couple times, was that for the first time I felt like they had some resilience, that they weren't just folding. They gave up some early goals and they came back and took control of games. I felt like they had turned into something different. I couldn't keep ignoring what they had done. I have reached the conclusion that I was just wrong. That it was another one of those fluky runs they go on. They've had a couple now with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as their manager, where they just look really good, like they did at the beginning of his reign, and like they did at the end of the last season. But even those last couple games, you saw them falter a little bit. Then you had the exit in the Europa League. The only way that Manchester United is going to finish in the top 4 this season is if they make a managerial change and make it now, before the international break is over and before they get back to playing in the Premier League. That's the conclusion I've reached. I say that because this is mentally the exact same team that we've seen year after year after year. Whether it's Mourinho, whether it's Solskjaer, they are not mentally built to compete for a title right now. You saw it with Martial's response. You're seeing it with their defense. They just need a complete makeover in terms of the mentality and the culture in the club. They need... I don't even know what exactly it is, but it's not whatever Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is providing them. You would think in some ways Mourinho would be the kind of manager that could get it out to him, but to me it goes beyond the manager. And that's where, of course, you're going to also hear the criticism of Ed Woodward in this. But somebody has to come in there and just completely start from scratch. Maybe that guy's Mauricio Pochettino. I think that would be really interesting and a logical place to look. But all I know is that OGS is not getting the job done. I thought that they had flipped that switch, that they had gotten over that mental barrier at the end of last season. Clearly they haven't. And I don't want to hear about him needing new players and not getting backed in the transfer market because Jadon Sancho didn't come. First of all, why do you need another world-class winger when you have a front three that was producing more goals than Liverpool's last season? Rashford, Martial, and Greenwood are not the problem on this team. That's point one. Point two, it's not like he hasn't gotten backed in the transfer window. Look at the defense that they put out there. They spent big money on Wan-Bissaka, big money on Bailly, of course that was before Solskjaer, big money on Maguire, and big money on Luke Shaw, again before Solskjaer. But it's not like they're going cheap on defense. They're just not, the defenders are not performing to what they should, and they're not living up to their price tags. A lot of that has to do with coaching. And then the other part of this is just Harry Maguire has been incredibly poor. And these problems are not getting fixed by bringing in Edison Cavani and Alex Telles and whoever else you want to bring in this transfer window. Throwing more money at it is not going to solve the problem, which is part of the reason I don't want to hear about him not getting back in the transfer window. And Bruno Fernandes came too. And now he's still been very good, but his little magic that came with his arrival is worn off as well. These problems are not getting solved by throwing more money out there and getting a new left back or a new backup striker. These are systemic, these are cultural problems. And that starts with the manager and it goes above him up to the board and the decision makers at the top. But those people are not as easy to change. And this is, I'm not one of those people that calls for coaches to be fired very often. I don't like doing it. I believe in giving people time, like Dean Smith got at Aston Villa. I don't think firing coaches is usually the solution. And in this case, it's not the complete solution either. But you have to point to something positive the manager is doing for your team. I don't see it at all. And now Donny van de Beek's agent is coming after him because Van de Beek's not starting. Which again goes to how are you going to fit those three guys who don't play defense in the midfield? The question that I've been asking since they signed him. The central defense has just been awful this year. Bringing in Alex Telles isn't doing anything to help that. And bringing in a new signing has not made anything better. They ignored the fact that Harry Maguire was nowhere near as good the year before they bought him as he was when he was the World Cup hero and Leicester's best player the season before that. Now, he was still much better at Leicester than he's been at Man United. But there was a clear downtick in his performance that has only continued. He's only continued to regress since he got there. I am much more concerned about Manchester United than I am Liverpool because I believe in Klopp's ability to build a culture. You've seen what he's been able to do. I think they're going to rebound. I think the only way for United to fix this quick enough to actually get where they belong and finish in the top four is for them to make a managerial change and make it right now before they play another game. I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but they can't keep on doing what they're doing right now. It was just unbelievably bad. Winner number 2, Real Madrid. We're going to go a little bit quicker with the rest of these. They get a 2-0 victory over Levante thanks to goals from Vinicius and Karim Benzema, one at the beginning, one at the very end. They're the only team in La Liga with 10 points so far. Atleti drew again. They had a really positive first game and have not been great since. Can't score right now. They haven't scored in their last 2 games. Barcelona dropped points against Sevilla. So Real Madrid came away as a winner because they got another 3 points. Looked a little bit better doing so. Still have major questions about this team and where they stand in terms of the European hierarchy. But everybody else has been so bad that at this point, a clean sheet, a fairly comfortable win as teams continue to drop points around you. They're right back in the same spot that they were at the beginning of the season, basically, which is somebody needs to put pressure on them because Barcelona dropped those points. So Barcelona, even though they had that extra game, they can't surpass Real Madrid's point total. So not specifically because of what Real Madrid did, but just if they can be consistent, they're probably going to win this league. Still have plenty of things I'm not sure about and things that I'm concerned about with them. But a good weekend overall. They continue to be pretty good in a in a world where so many teams have been bad. They've been okay so far, and that's good enough at this point in time. Loser 2 going to France and Rennes. They had a 2-2 draw with a winless Stade Reims team. You combine that with Lille winning again to draw level at the top of the table, and PSG's only 2 points back of them. It's not the end of the world. Nobody actually thought this team was going to compete for a title. But I've been curious to see whether they could put 5, 6, 7 wins together against these lesser teams in Ligue 1 and really give themselves a cushion, whether it's for second or third or whatever it might be, because Lille's looking really good at this moment in time, so maybe they're going to end up second. But with Marseille and Lyon not playing well at all right now and putting themselves at a disadvantage early in the season, Rennes had an opportunity just by winning the games that they should win to really cement themselves in that Champions League title race, which is even more important for them as a team that doesn't have all that much depth, that is going to be stretched when you start playing Champions League games here. To take advantage of a fairly generous schedule at the beginning of the year, which they have for the most part. I mean, they're still tied for the first place. But to take that next step, you got to win games like this. PSG's going to catch them fairly soon, no matter what they do. Maybe they are the third team and end up in a Champions League spot, but just disappointing for them because of how good they had been before this game. To drop these points, it's just disappointing. Puts them in a. It changes where they're at in terms of the way that Ligue 1 has gone so far. Again, it's one game. They could go win another couple and end up right back in first place for a little while. But disappointing result, just because I'm curious to see how good this team can be. And if you're expected to be a team competing for a Champions League spot, that's a game you got to win. Third winner, Atalanta. 5-2 win over Cagliari. 13 goals in 3 games. They're one of 2 teams, the other being AC Milan, with 9 points from 3, primarily because Inter and Lazio drew in the other big game of the weekend in Italy. One of the 2 big games that actually happened. I talked about this on Thursday. I'm just going to kind of repeat the same things here. This team is really good. They are scoring goals at a stupid rate again. They've been decent defensively. That's always going to be the question. But you're just not going to lose when you're scoring 4 or 5 goals a game. And they're not leaking them. They're going to give up a couple here and there, but they've been incredibly convincing so far. Easily the most convincing team in Italy. You got teams dropping points. They already got through a game with Lazio. AC Milan has been good, but AC Milan also has had a very easy schedule so far. All of their games, both Europa League qualifying and through Serie A. So definitely a positive start, but I'm not sold on them as a team that's really going to factor into this title race. I'm looking at Napoli, and I'm looking at Juve and Inter as the 4 teams I really think could make some noise and compete for this thing, in addition to Atalanta. But if they keep winning, it is not out of the question they win Serie A. And part of that was getting off to a really good start. That's exactly what they've done. Some other teams have fairly decent starts, but you drop points here or there, all of a sudden you got to beat this team. And to beat this team, you're going to have to score multiple goals because they're scoring multiple goals pretty much every game they play. They are remarkably fun to watch and are absolutely one of the best teams in the world, 10 teams in the world at this moment in time. Finally, our last loser, Hoffenheim. This is another team I was really curious to see what they did this weekend after that big win against Bayern Munich. I was not convinced that they were going to be a factor in the top four race in Germany. I wanted to see them put together another couple wins after the one against Bayern. They take an early lead against Eintracht Frankfurt and then give up 2 goals and lose. And so, right after being perfect, top of the table, all this momentum, they're now behind Leipzig, Bayern, and Dortmund. Only Bayern and Dortmund on goal differential, but they're not catching either of them on goal differential, which means they're going to have to pick up more points to catch them. Of course, I don't see that happening. That's not a bold take in any way, shape, or form. But all of a sudden, the 3 teams that you're expecting to definitely be better than them are ahead of them in the table. It happens that fast. One game where you blow a lead. And there are going to be games where weird things happen. You catch a couple tough breaks. So you got to find a way to close down leads if you're trying to get into this upper echelon to challenge your Borussia Mönchengladbachs and your Bayer Leverkusens of the world, your Wolfsburgs of the world up in that second tier. You've got a clear top 3 with Bayern, Dortmund, and Leipzig. And Hoffenheim really, really missed an opportunity to state their intent to compete there. Maybe they pull this thing back together and put together another nice stretch of form here, but that loss was pretty much all I needed to just sort of disregard them in the top 4 race. And they're a top 8, top 10 team. They're dangerous, but I don't see them finishing in a Champions League spot or anything, and in large part just because you got to be so consistent. And they have the great performance against Bayern and then go out and lose. So those are our winners and losers from the weekend in the world of European soccer. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to do a little bit of Champions League discussion now that we have the full draw to look at. It was happening as we did the show on Thursday. And a little bit of transfer talk with the window closed, specifically Thomas Partey's move to Arsenal, what it means for Arsenal, what it means for Atletico Madrid. You're watching Touchline Talk. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Touchline Talk. We're going to do some Champions League draw discussion here. Like I said, it was happening as we were doing the show on Thursday, so we got to react to the first group, but the first group is kind of the most boring because it's generally the best teams. You don't know who's actually having to play the tougher competition and who's catching breaks. So now we have the whole thing, which means we get to discuss it for a little bit here. The only group that really stands out in terms of somebody being unlucky and catching a bad break that you're looking at as a team that would expect to make the knockout round, to me, is Group H. You've got PSG, Manchester United, and Leipzig. Those are probably three of the best 16 teams in the world. I'm not sure United is at this moment in time, but they have an opportunity to figure this out and get significantly better defensively. But you would look at those three teams and expect all of them to be favorites to advance. Maybe not win their groups aside from PSG. But putting all three of them together, that's the group that immediately stands out. That if you're going to characterize one as a group of death, that's the one I would look at. I think the most balanced group is B, with Real Madrid, Shakhtar, Inter, and Borussia Mönchengladbach. I feel good about Real Madrid and Inter's chances of going through. I'm not particularly scared of Shakhtar or Gladbach. But those would be two teams that I would look at in another group that would have a chance of going through, that can take some points off people. So you're probably not going to see a comprehensive performance by Real Madrid and Inter, just because those are two decent teams that they've got in their group. You look at some of these other groups and it's just clear there's two and then everybody else. B is well balanced and has four good teams in it. I also think E is really interesting. Chelsea, Sevilla, Rennes, and Krasnodar. Of course, Chelsea's going to be the favorites to advance out of this group. You're not particularly scared of this group if you're Chelsea. You'll take it all day long. But the competition for spot 2 between Sevilla and Rennes, I find intriguing. Like I said before, Sevilla's not had a great history with this tournament. They make their living in the Europa League. But every time you win the Europa League, you get to go back to the Champions League. And then they go back down to the Europa League. So you look at this thing and they are absolutely set up to get to the round of 16. And the way they're playing right now, you would back them to do so. They are definitely playing like a team worthy of getting to the knockout round. And Rennes is going to be really interesting because it's hard to argue with the team that they have right now and what they've been able to do over this past year plus now. With the performances last year, their start to the season this year, yeah, they had a bad result at the weekend, but they still got a point. But that depth is a real question mark. And can you balance putting your full effort into the Champions League and also continuing to be at your best in Ligue 1? They've already sold a couple key pieces. And Sevilla is just, quite frankly, the better team. Not by all that much. But, so that's what I'm really interested to see what kind of challenge they can mount. Just because you traditionally don't see these sort of smaller upstart teams perform exceptionally well in the Champions League, especially when they haven't done it before, with the added pressure and the extra games and the pressure and strain it puts on your players, because they just don't have deep squads. It's one of the things that makes Atalanta a little bit different, is they have a decent amount of players at their disposal. They can just kind of sub guys in and out, to a certain extent at least. It's not really the case with Rennes. Again, they've already lost a couple of key pieces they had to sell. So that group I'm interested in, but I feel good about Chelsea and Sevilla being able to go through. Most fun group, speaking of Atalanta, is without a doubt D. You got Liverpool, Ajax, and Atalanta in there, which is just phenomenal from an attacking style of play perspective. We're going to get goals galore. Of course, you've got Ajax and their philosophy and history with playing, attacking, forward thinking. Atalanta is arguably the best attacking team in the world right now. And Liverpool, of course, is going to score goals as well. And with the way Liverpool's defense is playing, you might see a lot of 5-4, 4-3s, 4-2s, 5-2s in this group. So that'll be really fun to watch. But I think Ajax caught a bad break coming into this group. I feel really good about Atalanta. And of course, I feel really good about Liverpool as well, even with what happened against Aston Villa. So there aren't too many. I didn't look at any of these groups with the exception of H and really have a hard time picking who I think would go through. There's a clear top two in all of them. Maybe you get an upset or two. But at the end of the day, those are the groups I'm really looking at. There just isn't one that you feel is absolutely, absolutely brutal. Again, somebody's going to get unlucky out of Group H just because all three of them can't go through. But generally speaking, you got two teams and then two teams trying to pull off a surprise upset, get some upsets here or there. Also, I wanted to mention in Europa League, we've got a group with AC Milan, Lille, and Celtic, which is just kind of cool. You got your traditional power AC Milan, a really good Lille team that's playing well at the moment, and Celtic, again, one of your traditional powers, your historic teams. So it's nice to see, you get a lot of strange teams in the Europa League group stage and your quote-unquote big clubs, whether that's the Italian teams or the English teams or the German teams or whoever, sort of your second tier in the big leagues. You don't usually get something as cool as this. So that was definitely the group that caught my eye in the Europa League. And real quick before we get out of here, I also want to talk about Arsenal signing Thomas Partey from Atletico Madrid. Really like this move, and specifically just as a sign of intent for what Arsenal is trying to do and trying to capitalize on the momentum they have right now. Because it's been a good start to the season. They're winning every cup game they play. Doesn't matter which one it is. Arteta's got them going in the right direction 100%. But that midfield is still not good enough. It just isn't. But all of a sudden, you get Dani Ceballos back on loan. You put Partey as your sixth, sort of the guy to shield that defense. With the attacking options you have, the center backs have actually been good, where some of these other teams have struggled. Arsenal's been pretty good defensively. You got to give them credit. All of a sudden, it looks pretty good. Again, I'm not sure that they're quite there, but it's another one of those teams that if Manchester United and Chelsea and Man City continue to play this poorly, I didn't think there was going to be an opening in the top four. I'm starting to become convinced there will absolutely be at least one opening in the top four. I'm still looking at Spurs as the team to get that done and to jump into the top four. I said that from the beginning that I thought they would be a factor in that race, and I stand by that. But you get this kind of addition, I really like it. And it's an area that they need. It's a place they need to improve. He's proven himself at the highest level. Lucas Torreira is going the other direction in a loan. I also like that side of it for Atleti. They were really left with no choice. This is a move Partey wanted. Arsenal triggered the release clause. So you could do much worse than coming away with Lucas Torreira. I really like him. But he's just not quite on the same level, and he's not going to help Atletico score goals, and that's what they need right now. So, well done from Arsenal to get that thing over the line on deadline day. Of course, this is a link that had been happening, a relationship that had been building for a long time, but the actual deal itself kind of appeared out of nowhere. So, good for them. Arteta's got to feel like he's got the support of the board. They're going to give him what he needs to be successful. I guess I'll end with this on Arsenal. There are a lot of teams that have a lot more questions than Arsenal does right now. That's not something you've been able to say these past couple years. Again, it's early. Now we got an international break for everybody to regroup. But if you're an Arsenal fan, if you're Mikel Arteta, you got to feel good about where you're at right now, and especially watching all of these teams around you struggle so much. Coming up, 1 p.m. Eastern, Chris Brown around the bases. MLB playoffs in full swing. 4 games today. Also got yesterday's games to talk about as the division series start. Josh Molnox is back with his show tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. That's all we have for you today on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you Thursday.